Hello, I am honored to interview Paul Plotkin for the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress American Folklife Center. We thank you for your service, and we also thank you for sharing your memories of that service with us. This interview will be an important educational resource for Congress and the general public. Let's begin. When and where were you born?
I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in Bridgeport Hospital on Main Street in Bridgeport.
And what year?
Oh, 1921.
Okay.
June 19.
Who was the first person in your family to come to the United States, and where did they come from?
My paternal grandfather came from Robrsk in White Russia, and was probably in the early 1880s.
Long time. Who were your parents and what did they do? What were their occupations?
Well, my father had a lumber yard in Stamford, Connecticut, and my mother was a housewife.
And what about your siblings? What were their names and genders?
Well, my oldest brother was Robert Plotkin, and my middle brother was, his real name was Irving, but he liked to be called Leonard because we had an uncle, Irving, and they both worked in the lumber yard. And I became a real estate attorney.
Did any of them serve in the military?
Yes, my brother Leonard served in the South Pacific in the 33rd Infantry Division. And my brother Robert served in the Navy in California. And he was in charge of the warehouse where they distributed clothing and sheets and pillowcases and things like that.
What were you doing before you entered the service? At the end of the interview, we'll talk about what you were doing after you left, but what were you doing before?
I graduated Yale University in May of 1942, and I spent the summer working in the lumberyard.
In which branch of the military did you serve?
Well, originally, I enlisted in the Signal Corps. It wasn't active duty, and we went to radio school where we learned how to fix radios. And then I went into service, and after basic training in Seagirt, New Jersey, I went to work as a court typist in Camp Wood, which was part of Fort Monmouth in New Jersey. And then they sent me to Florida, and I wound up on an Air Force base. So I decided to transfer to the Air Corps. So I went to the Air Corps, and they accepted me, and I went to, I undertook an exam, and I was classified a navigator, but pre-flight was filled. So they sent me to Middle Georgia College. And I got through with that, and was on a field in Georgia, and then they needed men for infantry for D-Day. So I was transferred to the Army, the 66th Division, and I went overseas with the 66th Division.
How was that? So how was life in the military? Did you adapt to the food and the physical regime, and what was it like?
Oh, it was very boring, to tell the truth. Well, as I said, I just made do with whatever they gave to me. And so as far as I was concerned, the food was okay and the orders were okay. And I just tried to goof off as much as I could.
Where did you serve at this point? You were with the 66th Infantry. Where were you going?
Oh, I joined the 66th Infantry in Fort Rucker, Dothan, Alabama. And that was probably in May of 44.
Did you find you made friends at that point?
Yes, I made friends very easily. And I really had a buddy, Joe Howowich, and he sort of took care of me for the transition from the Air Force to the infantry. The infantry was like a whole different world. I kept asking myself, is this the U.S. Army? Because the Air Corps and the Signal Corps didn't prepare me for the Army. Because in the Air Corps and the Signal Corps, you were a qualified technician and you were treated like a technician. In the infantry, you were just treated like a rifle. Your purpose was, and you were expendable, and your purpose was to carry a rifle.
Well, that's very interesting. Quite a switch. So did you have any recreation when you were off duty? What did you do?
Yeah, no recreation.
So,
Moving around the first 2 weeks, you're in a camp. You're not allowed a pass from camp. So in Dothan, Alabama, there really wasn't that much to do except go to a bar and have some beer.
did you meet any Jewish fellow soldiers? Did you participate in any Jewish activities at this point?
No, there were very few. 2 Jewish boys in our company. And later on, I think we had another Jewish boy. But there were no Jewish facilities where we were.
Well, can you talk about the sinking of the Léopoldville?
It was Christmas Eve, December 24, 1944. And we were torpedoed around 5:30, 5.5 miles outside of Cherbourg Harbor. We could see the lights in Cherbourg.
Yeah.
And one of the tragedies of the sinking was that the people in Cherbourg were on limited duty because of the holiday, because of Christmas Eve. So there were only skeleton crews at all the harbor boats, and the boats were, they had what they call cold engines because they didn't have, the ships were sort of shut down for the holiday. So it took time for them to get organized and get people back in duty and warm up the ships. So that was one of the tragedies. The other another tragedy was originally they thought they would tow the boat in to Cherbourg, and a tug was dispatched to do that. But in the meantime, someone ordered the captain to lower the anchor because they thought we were drifting toward a minefield. So, but once they lowered the anchor, the crewmen had had packed suitcases and took off in the lifeboats. So there was nobody to raise the anchor. And another problem was the absence of communication. The commander of the convoy, we had 3 English destroyers and 1 French destroyer. And the commander of the convoy, first of all, didn't know there were troops on board. So he dispatched the destroyers to chase the submarine. And then there was just a lack of communication. He couldn't talk to Cherbourg. He had to talk to Portsmouth, England, because he didn't have the right code for Cherbourg. And he did take off about 500 men in his ship, but the ship, because of the rough seas, were banging to get one against the other, and he thought there'd be harmful damage to the ship. So he put on about 500 men and then pulled away. And the problem was, again, mainly communication. He didn't know what was going on. There was no order. The ship was loaded haphazardly, so there was no order to the troops. So we never received orders from anyone in charge. And the shore tried to communicate with the ship, but with blinkers, but they never got an answer.
Is that part of the reason I read that you were not supposed to talk about it afterwards?
General Eisenhower, first of all, the Battle of the Bulge was going badly, and we lost a lot of men there. And at one point, the Germans were asking the Americans to surrender. And the second, so he didn't want to hurt the rescue efforts going on in the States. And another reason was he didn't want to upset the British. He wanted to keep on good relations with the British. So the commander, John Pringle, was first reprehended by the British Admiralty, but Eisenhower sent a letter commending Commander Pringle, and so the British Admiralty rescinded the reprimand. But as far as I know that John Pringle never got another command of a convoy.
I don't mean to intrude, but could you tell us some of your feelings during that time when you didn't, I imagine, know whether you were going to survive or not? Do you remember those?
I think everybody was shell-shocked, and we couldn't accept the fact that the ship was going to sink. Well, first of all, we were told the ship would be towed in, but that was gossip. We didn't know for sure, and I think we just physically couldn't accept the fact that 1 minute we were at peace doing war games in the countryside of England, and the next minute we're in danger of losing our lives.
How did you survive?
I kept going back and forth. When we were first hit, I had just come back from the head, throwing up the supper, and I didn't have my overcoat on, and but the gun and my helmet were all where I was assigned a position. So I was pushed out of the hold, and the stairs were blown out. So we climbed up a ladder to get up on the deck. And then I went to we did have a fire drill, and I went to the fire station, and there was nobody there. But I saw the crew with suitcases leaving the ship and taking the lifeboats. And then I went back to the hold to see what was going on there. And there were two soldiers who were swimming underwater into the hold. And there was a pocket of airspace. And the soldiers there were trapped, and they were crying for God and for Mother. And I can still hear their cries today. And it was just too pitiful. I couldn't stand it. So I went back toward the life station, and there were about 7 or 8 stretchers. And some soldiers were picking them up. So I went and I grabbed hold of the handle for one, and a PT boat came alongside. And because of the rough sea, one ship was up in the air and the other ship was down. And then when they went up and down, we had to gauge the middle where they would meet, and we threw the stretchers to the PT boat. And they asked us to jump, but the ships were going up and down. It really was horrendous. So I was afraid if I were to be caught between the two ships, I'd be crushed to death. So we turned the guys down.
Wow. And what'd you do then?
I just wandered around the ship again.
Yeah.
And waiting for orders. I never heard of an order to abandon ship or anything. And finally, the ship kind of heeled over, and the soldiers started walking down the side of the ship into the water. And many of them drowned because they had the lifeboat, the life jacket was tied over the overcoat. And an army overcoat weighs a ton. And in the water, when it got water soaked, it would drag the soldier down to his death. So that was another occasion when we needed leadership.
Yes.
Because it was a crime. Soldiers never realized by tying the life jacket over the overcoat that were condemning themselves to death.
Oh, how awful. How truly awful. And how did you get off the ship?
Well, I walked down and there was a stretcher there. So I and another fellow picked up the stretcher and we walked down the ship and when we hit the water, we lost control over the stretcher. And I felt myself going down, down, down. And then all of a sudden, my life jacket took hold. And I felt myself going up, up, up. And I swam over to a raft, and I held on to the raft until an escort boat came out of Cherbourg. And I was the last one picked up.
Wow.
By that ship.
Must have been freezing.
The temperature of the water was around 50 degrees, but I was kicking myself, kicking in the water to get the blood circulating. And you're right, the fellows climbed up on top of the raft and they froze to death. But staying in the water and staying active kept me warm.
Wow, that's quite a story. There was a movie, PBS did a movie. Did you see their special? I just saw it on this, the soldier and the, what's it called? The Silent Soldier and the Portrait. PBS did a documentary. Have you seen that?
No, I saw the one, the History Channel in 1990, I think it was, did a half-hour segment on Léopoldville.
Well, you might, I can't say enjoy, certainly bringing back all these memories aren't enjoyable, but you could check it out on YouTube. It was good. So did you spend time in Cherbourg then? After?
No, we went, we bivouacked in Cherbourg, I don't know, for a couple of weeks. And then we went to Rennes and we stayed in they had a stadium, a bicycle stadium, which was circular. And they used to do bicycle speed racing. And we were there for a while. And then we went to Saint-Nazaire-Lorient where there was a German pocket. They bypassed these German submarine pens because they were so fortified, and there were 50,000 Germans in that whole area. So we were there just for warning purposes because we were half strength.
Yeah.
We lost 763, approximately 760 men.
Terrible. Well, I guess you didn't anticipate that. But what was it like coming home afterwards? I mean, that's such a powerful experience. What did you do when you came back?
Well, there again, I didn't come back with the division. I was goofing off. They had a program in Dijon, France, where we were supposed to learn French. But of course, we never went to school. But by the time I got back from Dijon, the division had already gone home. But they were told, I understand from people telling me, they were told not to talk about the incident. And Eisenhower froze everything for 50 years.
Why do you think they did that?
As I say, he did it because he wanted to keep relationship with the British Admiralty. Because the Admiralty, through John Pringle, they really grew on so many points. And another reason, he didn't want to hurt the war effort because the mistakes that were made were really needlessly made.
When you returned home to your family and community, what did you do then?
Well, under the GI Bill, I went to Columbia Law School.
Oh.
And I got my degree, and I passed the bar. And so for some years, I worked in the lumberyard, and I tried to build up the law practice.
Was this in Stamford?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you see any of the fellow veterans after the war?
I met one time with 3 of the fellows who were in my platoon. And that was the only time. I kept up the correspondence with my buddy, Joe Howowich, but eventually that fell by the roadsides.
Well, how did those wartime experiences affect your life? Did it have an influence on things that you did or the way you perceived things?
No, it was an experience. I learned a lot, and I just got busy with work.
Is there any message that you would like future generations to give to them, people who view this video? Is there any kind of a lesson you want to impart, or? No, today with the
internet and all that's going on, I think the new generation it's going to be a lot smarter than the old generation.
Is there anything we haven't discussed that you want to talk about?
No, not really.
Thank you for your service, your interview, and for what you've done for us.
I was going to say, did any of your children serve in the military?
No.
We thank you for your service.
I just remembered something.
Good.
When I went in, I went into Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and there was snow on the ground. It was in February of 1943, and there was snow on the ground, and they assigned me guard duty. I wound up having guard duty on 3 birthdays in service. Anyway, they gave me a wooden gun with the only thing that moved on the gun was the bolt. And so I said, what do I do if somebody comes and tries to rob the warehouse? He said, click the bolt.
Oh boy. Oh my, that is a great story. What a way to celebrate your birthday. But through it all, you kept moving forward and just kept going. That is a lesson for all of us about your life, and that we should try to do that as well. And thank you very much.
How about those medals that we saw? Pictures of some of your awards and medals for this. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, I got the Purple Heart and the Brown Star for Valor because of helping with his country. Oh, the French one. In the year 2000, the French government decided to award a medal to anybody who served in France. And I served in France, so I got the, I forgot to write it down. But I got a medal.
Yeah, I sent them a picture.
Yeah. I got a lot of medals.
Very interesting.
You certainly did get a lot of medals, and we have some very handsome pictures of you, and you're very dashing, smoking your pipe. So that's an important part of the story too. And you look like a movie star.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to be 100 next month.
That is amazing and wonderful. And are you doing anything special for Memorial Day?
Yeah, the state of New Hampshire is declaring it a fall Plotkin Day. So.
So you're going to be honored there too, as you should be.
As you should, right.
Right. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, for your inspiration. And Diane, thank you for all of your work in putting all the background information together. Once we get the video put together and edited, and we will send you a copy. We will send the one to the Library of Congress, And we will send one to the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County, where we will proudly display it.